So in this video, or possibly series of videos, I'm going to talk about some different variations on the subject-verb agreement question type. So in a separate video, I talked about how you can recognize that you're dealing with a question on subject-verb agreement, and briefly, that's going to be if you have a mix of singular and plural verbs in the answer choices. So like in this case, we've got plural, plural, singular, plural. That means that you're dealing with a subject-verb agreement question. In other words, the verb tense, whether it's past, present, future, etc., is not really going to be the issue, and it's also not a question about verb form. So those are things I'm going to talk about in separate videos. But this is the sign that you're dealing with a subject-verb agreement question. And the big takeaway from it is usually the one that's not like the other three is going to be correct. But we still want to be able to recognize the subject because that's what's being tested, and that's really the main issue that students tend to have with these questions is identifying the subject. One thing that can make it hard is that they usually don't do what we see in this question, and that is to put the subject right next to the blank. I mean, you might see that every once in a while in Module 1, but that's not going to happen too often. So like this is pretty straightforward. Her filmmaking has been, because all the others would end up pairing a plural verb with that singular subject. Okay, so that would be pretty much the easiest type that you could encounter. Moving on to this one, what do we have here? Well, again, we have that mix of answer choices, but as we focus on the sentence, or the portion of the sentence with the blank, what is our subject? It's not a wild card, it is playing. Okay, so you can have ing words that act as nouns. Those are called gerunds, and gerunds are going to be singular. So playing, the act of playing a wild card, allows a player to change the color. So that's our only singular verb. All of the others would be plural because they allow, they have allowed, they are allowing. Those would all pair with plural subjects. So what we're going to see as we move through these examples is they're going to use different types of things to separate the subject from the blank. Okay, this one isn't terribly tricky because our actual subject and the noun right before the blank are both singular, right? Traffic is bad. We wouldn't say the traffic are bad. Traffic is bad, so traffic is singular. The spiral is one of the few cohesive elements. So there's not really an issue here because even if someone misidentified traffic as being the subject, they would still potentially get the right answer because there's no mismatch. We get to the later examples, we're going to see that they like to mismatch those. So if you have an actual singular subject, they're going to like to put a plural noun in front of the blank to try to trick you. But in this case, our subject is spiral. What is this portion here? I believe that would be called a participle phrase. It's a modifier that modifies or describes spiral. And so that kind of modifier is not going to, contain the main subject of the sentence. So we just want to say here, the spiral is. The spiral is one of the few cohesive elements in this sculptor's sculptures. Now, this one here is representative of something that would be a little more tricky. So what's going on in this case? It says, in some cases, the toxins the frog produces to defend itself from predation actually blank its appeal to certain predators. Okay, so there's a lot that separates our subject from our blank, from our verb. We could certainly look at the answer choices and come up with a pretty good hint as to what the answer is going to be, given that we've got one that's plural and three that are singular. But again, we want to see if we can actually identify the subject. Here's where crossing out words, unnecessary words, can be really helpful. Okay, what kind of things can we cross out? Well, certainly adverbs and adjectives. So actually is an adverb. We can get rid of that. That doesn't affect anything. Prepositional phrases, from predation. Starts with a preposition, ends with a noun. You can get rid of that. So now we're left with the toxins the frog produces to defend itself, blank. What we have here is really an implied that. The toxins that the frog produces to defend itself. And so we could call this a that clause, a relative clause. The terminology can get a little bit tricky there, but the important thing here is that our actual subject is going to be toxins. So the toxins enhance the frog's appeal to certain predators. So again, that's a really good clue, but if we cross those things out, or at least mentally block them out, we can identify the subject more easily. Another way that they will separate the subject from the verb is to put an appositive in between them. And so what's an appositive? More specifically, a non-essential appositive. It's something like this here that's enclosed within a pair of commas. So it's talking about Van Gogh, and it says, although each of these paintings, which include Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear and Self-Portrait as a Painter, do something regarding his distinctive post-impressionist style. So the first thing I would say here is to cross out or ignore that appositive. Then what do we have? Well, we have a prepositional phrase, of these paintings. So it starts with a preposition, ends with a noun. We can ignore that. So although each one reflects, so we've got a singular subject, even though that's a plural noun, doesn't matter because it's part of a prepositional phrase. So each one reflects. That's our singular one. All three of these are plural. And so once again, that pattern holds. Now it's important to keep in mind that the subject doesn't always come before the verb. So a question like this one flips things around. We look at our sentence with the blank, assisting with the excavation, blank, Lord Carnarvon, blah, 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 blah. So what is our subject here? It is not the excavation. It's also not assisting. It is Lord Carnarvon. I think it's safe to say, I would have to double check this, but I think it's safe to say that when the subject comes after the verb is generally going to be a to be verb. It's certainly the case here. We're dealing with, the verb to be. So that's a single person. He was assisting with the excavation. Now, in this case, it wouldn't have been a huge deal if someone had misidentified the subject as the excavation or even assisting, because all of those are singular. It could be an issue if we had a question like this one. So, among the essays, blank, T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. So here we have a plural noun right in front of the blank, but that's not our subject. Think about it this way. T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock was among the essays. Okay, so was among the essays. So that is pretty tricky, and I think if somebody was just going by the sound of it, among the essays were, they would probably pick A. But we do want the singular one, and again, this is a little bit atypical in terms of the distribution of answer choices, but really focusing on identifying the subject here, and not so much on question type recognition.